Hi everybody! Today I'm going to read you a story about me. I've gotten to meet some wonderful, great Americans, and I'm going to share them with you in this story right now. You ready? Libby meets some great Americans. The tour bus slowed to a stop. Libby was so excited to meet and learn about some great Americans. She wondered how she would be able to go back in time to meet all these people. Suddenly she exclaimed, "I know! I'll go to the Time Tree back in New York." Libby tapped her crown and said, "The Time Tree, please." The wind started to blow. It picked her up and spun her around, and it set her down high in the branches of the Time Tree. "Libby, how nice to see you again," Rita Book greeted. "What brings you back?" "I want to meet some great Americans," replied Libby. "Can you help me?" "How about we look in a book?" Rita suggested, pointing to a particular book. "This one has a lot of great Americans in it." Libby opened the book, and all of a sudden, the wind started to blow. It picked her up and spun her around, and then set her down. When Libby opened her eyes, she was sitting in a tour bus, but she was no longer wearing her usual clothing. "First stop," the bus driver called, "Susan B. Anthony." Libby got off the bus and found that she was standing outside a courthouse. There were many people standing around, and Libby could hear a woman speaking loudly. Susan B. Anthony shouted as she walked away from the courthouse, "Women should have the right to vote." "What's going on?" Libby asked her. "Some people don't think that women should have the right to vote," she answered. "It's time for things to change, and I am going to work hard for women to have the same rights as men," she stated. "My name is Libby. You will be happy to know that in the future those changes will happen and women will be able to vote. Thank you for helping make that happen," Libby said. "I am glad that this will all be worth it. Now, I've got to get back to work to make those changes," she said as she waved goodbye to Libby. Back on the tour bus, Libby looked through the book again. "Harriet Tubman," she read aloud, "a leader in the Underground Railroad." "Next stop, Harriet Tubman," the driver called. The sky was beginning to get dark as Libby stepped off the bus. Libby noticed that she was wearing an old-fashioned cloth dress and that there was an old wagon full of hay up just ahead. As she approached the wagon, she heard a whisper. "Hello?" Libby called nervously. "It's me, Harriet Tubman," a voice answered. Libby looked more closely and gasped when she saw a lady looking at her from underneath a pile of hay. "I'm Libby, and I want to know all about your railroad that's under the ground," she said. "Well, it's not really a railroad, and it's not even under the ground. We just call it that to help keep it a secret," she explained. "It is really just several safe places to stop and hide slaves as they escape to freedom," explained Harriet. Libby thanked her for explaining the Underground Railroad, wished her good luck, and waved goodbye. Libby could see the tour bus in the distance and made her way across the field. She opened the book as soon as she sat down in the bus. "Hey, there's George Washington," Libby exclaimed. "I want to learn more about him." "Next stop, George Washington," the bus driver announced. Libby got off the bus and found herself in a room that looked like an office. Libby saw a man working at his desk. "Hello, I'm George Washington," the man said as he looked up from his work. "I'm Libby, and I've come back in time to find out more about you," she replied. George began. "I am the first president of the United States, and I am called the father of our country. Washington, D.C. is named after me." "Wow, you are a very important person," Libby replied. "And now I'll let you get back to your work." "Thank you for stopping by, Libby," said George. Libby got back on the bus and looked through the book. "I'd like to learn about James Madison next," Libby decided. A few minutes later, the bus stopped. Libby stepped off the bus and into a big room with a lot of men huddled around a piece of paper. "I wonder what's going on here," Libby thought. One of the men finally spoke up. "I've signed the document and my work here is done. I'm going home." "Mr. Madison," Libby called after him, "what did you just sign?" That was the Constitution of the United States of America. It's a set of laws or rules to protect the rights that we want to have in America. We were all signing it to show that we agree with what it says, he explained. "Now, if you will excuse me, please, I must be getting home," he smiled. Libby waved and stepped back onto the bus. Who else can I learn about? She wondered as she flipped through the pages of the book. Martin Luther King Jr., a leader in the civil rights movement, Libby read. I'd like to meet him. Next stop, Martin Luther King Jr., the bus driver called. Libby stepped off the bus to find herself standing in a large crowd of people who were all listening to his speech. Free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, we are free at last, Martin Luther King Jr. said, ending his speech. Dr. King, Libby called as she made her way through the crowd. I'm Libby, she said. Thank you, Libby, for coming to hear my speech, he said, shaking her hand. I only heard the last part, Libby said sadly. The most important part of the speech was about my wish that all people could get along no matter the color of their skin. I am going to continue to speak to people about the importance of fairness and living together in peace, he explained. Libby smiled, knowing that Dr. King's wish could come true. Libby turned a page in the book. The wind started to blow. It picked her up and spun her around and around. When it finally set her down, she opened her eyes. She was sitting on Abraham Lincoln's shoulder at the Lincoln Memorial. Did you learn about some of our great Americans? He asked. Yes, I did, she answered. I got to meet so many wonderful people. Then Libby smiled as she drifted off to sleep. You know, guys, reading about all of these great Americans reminds me of all the heroes that you have chosen to honor or are planning to honor at your celebration. You are surrounded by great Americans, and I can't wait for you to meet them just like I met the ones in this book. Bye!